My name is John Shore. I go by Sweet Chuck. I'm the owner-operator of Hot Rod Tattooing in Martins Ferry, Ohio, and this is the Handmade in Ohio art show at Ohio University Eastern. The last few times I've given this lecture, I've kind of just made it an oral curation of the exhibit. So we start with this piece on the corner here, and this piece all the way down to this piece with the tiger I refer to as the Wall of Heroes. And the reason I refer to it as the Wall of Heroes is these are the first artists that really inspired me to progress myself as an artist and to learn this visual language that we'll be speaking of throughout this curation. So this corner piece here is the only one hung out of context, and that's because it was just a nice place for that size piece. This is an original charcoal drawing from Philip Lou. Philip Lou is a Swiss tattooer in Europe. I'm 43 years old now, and Philip Lou is 43 years old. I've been tattooing for 22 years. He's been tattooing since he was 12 years old. He's a second generation tattooer, comes from a very prolific family of artisans, and has become one of the icons of the tattoo industry internationally. This was a study he did for a book that he came out with in the early 2000s called Dragons. There were 2 volumes of the Dragons compendiums, and this was a study done for Dragons 1. So everything else kind of runs chronologically, and that's why this piece requires a little extra special sort of description. These 2 pieces here are it's a picture of and an original piece from Norman Keith, aka Sailor Jerry Collins. Sailor Jerry is considered to be the godfather of American traditional tattooing. He's also the first American tattooer to reach out to the Asiatic cultures and try to bring the vocabulary of that type of tattooing to the Western world. This is an original line drawing that he did probably in the 50s or 60s. And Norman Keith Collins, Sailor Jerry, is considered to be like the beginning of tattooing going from being something that's a trade-associated working man carnival sort of thing into like something that people were actually collecting and taking on as talismans as they went throughout their life. So Norman Keith Collins reaches out to this man, Katsuo Oguri, who goes by the tattoo surname Horihide in Okinawa, and he has Horihide come to Hawaii where his studio was. And he, as well as a few other practitioners and artists from the San Francisco Bay Area, met in Hawaii and had this kind of think tank brainstorm on how to share ideas and how to bring Western ideas into the Eastern culture and Eastern ideas into the Western culture as far as tattooing goes. So there was this great philosophical bridge that was created during this meeting in Hawaii back in the late 60s. At that meeting was Ed Hardy. Ed Hardy is a very well-known tattooer. He's probably the most famous icon of American tattooing to the layman. Ed Hardy was the first highbrow tattooer, and by that I mean he was the first fine artist that focused on tattooing, who had a body of work that was not generally considered to be tattoo imagery, and was a respected artist in other mediums before he started working in tattooing. Ed Hardy has been mystified by tattooing since he was a child as well. There's lots of pictures of Ed Hardy drawing tattoos on his friends when he was 10 years old. You know, he was a surfer from San Francisco who started collecting tattoos from these iconic tattooers in the 60s. And he starts writing letters to Sailor Jerry because Sailor Jerry was this very prolific, very famous tattooer. And Sailor Jerry invites him out to his place when he's having this meeting with Katsuo Oguri. This meeting changed everything that happened in American tattooing from that point forward. Don Ed Hardy and Katsuo Oguri became fast friends. Katsuo Oguri took Ed Hardy back to Japan with him, and he pretty much never came back. He's been living back and forth from San Francisco and Japan ever since. His visual language is a direct reflection of his time spent in Asia and his roots in the American traditional that he learned from his contemporaries such as Sailor Jerry. So these are a couple pieces from Ed Hardy. This piece in particular is a one-of-a-kind kind of situation. Back in the 80s, Ed Hardy would travel around to tattoo conventions, and he would sell these black and white printed images of back pieces, and he encouraged other tattooers to finish out the color spectrum on them. So they were printed on watercolor paper so that you could watercolor color them and hang them in your studio, so you could have this Don Ed Hardy design that you put your own flavor to. Well, this is the actual piece that he traveled with when he was traveling the convention circuit in the 80s. This is the one that he hand painted. So this is a print of an image that he did that he hand colored. So it's kind of a rare item. This Katsuo Oguri piece is a silkscreen on rice paper from 1979. So definitely things that are historically significant to the tattoo culture. This is a really rare print that he limited edition release that he put out in the early 2000s. Ed Hardy has this loose style to him. He feels that even when you're tattooing, you should see like brush strokes, even with your tattoo needles, if you think of your tattoo needles as brushes. So this whole wall is probably the most influential 4 or 5 people on me as a professional artist. And I feel that that's a good handful of names to throw out as heavily influential tattooers in the scope of the international tattoo vocabulary. So from the Wall of Heroes, we move on to contemporary artists that I work with. These pieces right here are from Maylin Biondillo. Maylin is a junior tattooer at Hot Rod. By junior, I mean she's been there less than 5 years. She's been tattooing about 5 years, and these are some of her pieces. This exhibit, more or less, is about the vocabulary that an artist brings into the tattoo culture and how the tattoo culture's vocabulary influences artists in other mediums as well. Every type of medium that you're working in, whether it's painting, colored pencil, sculpture, whatever, photography, there are things that are specific to that medium that are the language of that particular discipline. So these roses here are very indicative of like tattoo style roses. And even this, this take on like a Byzantine Jesus is very reminiscent of how it would be approached tattoo style. So these are some pieces from Maylin Biondillo. Next we move down to Corey Cook. Corey Cook is a senior artist at Hot Rod Tattooing. I've worked with Corey now for about 8 years. He's been tattooing 15. You can see as you immerse yourself deeper and deeper into this vocabulary, the things that you see in tattooing bleeds out into the things that you're creating otherwise. So watercolor paintings, coquille drawings, acrylic paintings, all those things kind of have this flavor of things that are tattoo related. Watercolor painting is probably the most commonly associated shared medium with tattooers, in that most all tattooers paint, and most all tattooers paint in watercolor, if not only, at least partially. The approach to watercolor painting is almost exactly hand in hand with the approach to laying in color for traditional Americana tattooing. Heavy blacks faded into strong, bold colors with lots of skin tone highlights. That's the traditional way. And Corey Cook is a very prolific traditional tattooer. You'll see that approach, heavy blacks to color to skin tone, in almost all of his work. This piece is a prime example of that, and very much is very easily translatable to a tattoo. So these are some pieces from Corey Cook all the way down to about here. This is a study for a back piece he did. These are some of the flash designs that he's done over the years for different specials we've had. We get into some of my work over here, from here over to the break in the wall. These are all pieces of mine. I'm heavily influenced by the Japanese and Asiatic approach to art and philosophy. So there's always a heavy Japanese kind of feel to the things I do, even if they're not Japanese like motifs. There are certain symbols in the Japanese culture that you see frequently in tattoo iconography. One of those would be the Japanese Oni demon. Oni demons are personifications of all the negative attributes of Meiji period or samurai period men. So during the time that, that samurai shogunates were running the Orient, women were considered less than most property, and they were brutalized in many different ways. Buddhist monks became concerned that the abuse that women were suffering at the hands of their male counterparts was going to lend to a weakening of the country, that the country itself was going to lose the children that it needs to be a strong country, because so many women and children were being killed on a regular basis by just men that didn't consider them to be humans. So the Buddhist monks came up with kind of these special stories, just like on a lot of, like religion is how you police people when you can't physically police them. So you're policing their minds or you're policing their thoughts. So Buddhist monks started putting these consequential storylines into place to teach kind of an ethical code for the people that weren't showing much of an ethical code. So the Oni demon is an anthropomorphic personification of all the negative attributes of men. They are ogreish, kind of clumsy, scary creatures that are antisocial and live outside of where populations of people are. They're frequently rape and eat women and children. They're kind of bad dudes. So by shining light on these Japanese Oni demons and painting them out to be these evil villains of this kind of philosophy on how you treat other people, it made men stop acting that way because they didn't want to be put in the same category as these monsters. So Oni demons carry a lot of historical significance with tattooing, the image of the Oni, and even the dichotomy of the human condition as we see ourselves as both good and evil carries over artistically in every medium. In the tattoo culture, a lot of people get Oni demons tattooed on them like they would get the devil tattooed on them to show, for a variety of reasons, but to at least be a symbol of the negative qualities of the human character. This Oni demon has yellow eyes. I've been exposed to a lot of fiction and art lately where they're using the metaphor of demons with yellow eyes as a metaphor for like the author or the artist's issues with alcoholism in the past, because yellow eyes signify your liver failing and you getting jaundiced. So I painted an Oni with yellow eyes because I thought it was kind of a universally recognizable. So demon with the yellow eyes. Koi fish are also something you see very popular in tattoo motifs lately. Not lately, but as far as commercial focus on the tattoo culture, that's a 10-year or 15-year thing. The tattooing has pretty much stayed off the radar of mainstream culture for a long time. It was always considered kind of an underground or fringe society sort of thing. But with television shows and magazines and books being put out all the time about tattooing, there's been a lot more like mainstream focus on the culture and the countercultures that follow along with it. So I've tattooed more koi fish in the last 10 years I've tattooed 10 times more koi fish in the last 10 years than I did in the previous 10 years because of the focus on the tattoo culture as far as like mainstream pop culture in the last 10 years. This koi fish is a dragon koi. The mythology around the koi fish and the reason that they're such significant animals in tattoo iconography is that in the shogunate periods, late 1600s, early 1700s in Japan, people had nothing. If you passed on the hand tools that your family had from previous generations, that was like passing on a dowry or passing on wealth from one generation to the other. One of the things that these farming people had a lot of on this island were these koi fish. And koi fish are kind of fancy carp. They're fancy goldfish pretty much. So the significance with a koi fish is that koi fish live to be as large as the body of water that they live in. So if you had a fairly prolific family and you had some money and you had a fairly big house, you probably had a fairly big pond or several fairly big ponds around your house, and you probably had koi fish in them because they were the most decorative thing, and they have a feng shui element to them as well. So those koi fish could not only grow to be 5-6 feet long, but they could live to be 100, 150 years old easily. So as one generation passed away, they passed on that koi fish or group of koi fish to their predecessors, and then to their leftover family, and then so on and so on. So it would be very common for a person to inherit a koi fish from his great-great-grandfather that was 120, 150 years old. Because those fish lived to be so old, and because they were passed on generationally, they become symbols of wealth and prosperity. So, you know, if your family was really well-to-do and you had this giant fish that you were passing on from generation to generation, it was a symbol of your status in society. So there's a mystical element associated with koi fish as well, because of their long life and because they're very smart. As far as fish go, they're very clever. They're usually referred to as the dogs of the pond because they will come to you when they see you. They will eat out of your hands. They'll perform tricks like a Cocker Spaniel or a Schnauzer. So when they finally pass away, according to mythology, and there's no heaven or hell in Japanese culture, it's always other worlds, but the translation to English from the Japanese words for these things are commonly referred to as the underworld or heaven, and that's not really how they feel theologically or philosophically. That's just kind of like the closest translation to the words that they use. So according to the mythology, when a koi fish passes away, and it's after a long life, it dies, it swims to the underworld, and it swims through the Rainbow Gate. The Rainbow Gate is depicted many different ways by many different artists. Some depict it as a Japanese archway that's painted like a rainbow. Some depict it as an actual rainbow that the fish is swimming under or through. I've done it in paintings and tattoos where it was a Japanese archway with rainbow-colored water, almost like a shower coming down it as the fish was going through it. But as the fish swims through the Rainbow Gate, it turns into a dragon. So koi fish are baby dragons. So this is the transformative process where the koi fish is not quite a koi fish, not quite a dragon. To me, when that transformation would occur on a practical level, I've always felt that it would start happening at the head and at the tips of the fins first. So whenever I'm painting or drawing a koi fish that's turning into a dragon, I generally have the face starting to turn more dragony and the tips of the fins starting to turn more dragony. This is a painting I did for my son. The obvious metaphor between the transformative process between a young koi fish to an older experienced dragon is pretty obvious. So once these koi fish turn into dragons, the accumulated knowledge that the fish has garnished from its long life turns into a physical manifestation of a pearl, and the dragon ascends to heaven carrying this pearl of wisdom of the collected life experiences of the fish. So in relation to this piece that I did for my son, you know, he's changing from adolescent to man. He's 17 this year. I painted this year. This painting is called 2017. And this is him physically manifesting himself as a dragon from koi, coming out of, you know, stormy, turbulent water that a lot of adolescents have during that time of their life, with the moon setting on the sunset of his youth as he's becoming this dragon and manifesting himself as a grown-up. So these Japanese images are constantly being used in that way. There's a lot of tattooers that have painted dragon kois for their kids as they've aged. These stories are kind of long-standing and are part of the visual language of tattooing, and they carry over into the rest of the artwork that we do. So here we have a study I did for a client when I was out in California. Here's a water study I did, a wing study I did. This is a monkey for an art show about 2017 is the Chinese Year of the Monkey. So I did this for an art show in Cleveland, revolved around the Chinese Year of the Monkey. This is part of a 20th anniversary collaborative flash set. Flash is the industry term for the images applied to the wall. Like if you walk into a tattoo shop and you see pictures everywhere and you say, I want this, you're picking a flash image off the wall. We're doing a collective studio flash set for our 20th anniversary. So this is a piece from Matt Emmel, Corey Cook, and myself, and all the rest of the flash pieces for that set are and will be collaborative pieces between all 5 people that tattoo there. This is a flash page I did for a Halloween special a couple years ago. So, moving from Corey and myself, who are very traditionally influenced artisans by the Japanese and the traditional Americana vocabulary, over to Matt Emmel, who is a not so traditionally influenced artisan when it comes to the type of imagery that he's carried over into his tattooing. Matt, like myself, is an illustrative realist, so we both work in illustrative components of realism. This is obviously not an illustrative realistic piece. This is obviously a surrealistic piece, and in the tattoo medium, this would be referred to as a biomechanical piece. Most of the rest of these pieces are not necessarily done to be tattoos or to be reflections of the tattoo, but they're definitely things in it that reflect that a tattooer did this, to me, definitely. Matt has aspirations to illustrate a children's book. The large monkey images are paintings he's done for his children's book. He's doing a kid's book about monkeys that are tortured so they can be prepared for the space program. So here's a monkey with a rocket pack strapped to his back, thrown out of a plane, you know. Here's another monkey actually closer to where the end of the book would be, you know, reflecting his time in space. So these are some images from Matt Emmel, obviously a very, very accomplished artist. We move over here to this wall. These are pieces from Randy Euler, who is another junior tattooer at Hot Rod. Randy Euler holds the only person in the Ohio Valley to have made it through his apprenticeship award at Hot Rod Tattooing. Ergo, he's the only tattooer at Hot Rod Tattooing that started and finished an apprenticeship at Hot Rod Tattooing and is still working at Hot Rod Tattooing. Lots of people start apprenticeships. Maybe 5% of them actually finish apprenticeships when you're dealing with being apprenticed by professional tattooers. A very, very demanding thing. So these are images directly based off of tattoo iconography. This is the first watercolor painting that Randy ever did. His first assignment for his first watercolor painting, and I think for the first like 5 or 10 paintings that he did, were to copy paintings from accomplished tattoo masters. So this is a repaint of a Bob Shaw image that was painted probably in the mid-70s, and Randy painted that again, I think, in probably 2010. And here are some other repaints. Like this is a William Grimshaw repaint of a snake page. This was a page that's probably, the original painting was probably done in 1910, 1915, and you know, Randy repainted this in 2011. Randy very much embraces the traditional tattoo iconography look to his fine art when he's doing art outside of tattooing. But as a tattooer, he's very much a black and gray fine line artist. We move over to this wall. This is our Halloween wall. One of the most popular promotions that Hot Rod Tattooing does all year long is a Halloween special. A lot of tattoo shops do it. A lot of tattoo shops love Halloween, and we're no exception. So we do a collaborative flash page every year in that we will put together a flash page. Each artist will put together a flash page, and then I will lay out the graphic design and lay them out in large prints. And then anything off of these pages would be $31 on Halloween. So we do these, you know, $150, $200 tattoos for $31 to give back to the people that collect from us a little bit. And not to sound egotistical, but it's very hard to get tattooed from me. I'm booked out for long periods of time, and if you don't want to wait 6 months to get a little cool tattoo from me, then you can get it on Halloween, and you can get it really inexpensively. So The Halloween promotion is one of the biggest promotions we do of the year. Generally, we have 100+ people lined up outside of our tattoo shop starting about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we generally tattoo over 100 people in an 8-hour shift. So it's pretty fun. We decorate, and the Halloween special is definitely something that people find synonymous with hot rod tattooing, and a lot of good artwork comes out of it. So we would be overlooking a big part of the culture of our studio if we didn't put at least some of the pages from Halloween's past up as well. So from the Halloween pages, we move on to the hot rod extended family. So everything on these walls are pieces from people that do guest spots at Hot Rod Tattooing, people that we consider to be very influential as far as their style and motivation, and also on their ability to bring a different voice to what they're doing to the people that get tattooed around here. It's important to me that people aren't just always being subjected with the same art. Art gets stale like everything else. Stale faster than a loaf of bread left out with the twist tie off, honestly. So you have to bring these new voices in, these new people in as often as possible, not only to offer a different voice as far as the type of tattooing that we're offering at the studio, but to offer up all these different ideas to us so that we can take on these other influences into our own styles. We have a couple pieces here. Matt Rohr, he's a tattooer in Canton. Chris Porter, he's a tattooer in Virginia. Margot Libben, she works with Matt Rohr at Eulogy Tattoo in Canton. The guys from Eulogy are at Hot Rod quite a bit. Eulogy is a very strong, stable platform for tattooing in Ohio. That's probably one of the most long-standing studios in Canton, and we're very happy that we work so closely with them. These pieces are from Dave Sinor. Dave Sinor owns American Monarch Tattoo in Monterey, California. Dave is a very, very accomplished painter. He has stacks and stacks and stacks of paintings just sitting around. I have a lot of his work at the studio. To pick 4 pieces to hang for Dave was difficult to do because we have so many to do, or so many from him. But these were the ones that we felt personal attachment to. So these are some of the things that Dave's painted for me or my business partner personally. These pieces right here are from Chad Ramsey. Chad Ramsey worked at Hot Rod Tattooing for the better part of a decade. He is a very accomplished artist. He owns the Illinois Tattoo Company in Bloomington, Illinois. He is probably my proudest pupil, I would say. Like, he's the guy that's gone the farthest outside of the studio from directly based on the influence that he's had at the studio, both for myself and the people that he's worked with. So not having anything from Chad Ramsey would be a crime as well. These pieces come from Chronic Tattoo in Cleveland, Ohio. This is a piece done by Vic Savage. Vic Savage works at Hot Rod very regularly. He is a super, super great guy and a really good tattooer and painter. And he has this wonderfully elegant but strong style to his artwork. And I feel like this painting is a good example of that. These pieces are from Tony DiRigo. Tony DiRigo is what I loosely refer to as my mentor. Like, I'd been tattooing for a while when I hooked up with him, but he was the first person to really pushed me into the Japanese aesthetic, and we both explored the Japanese stylings and philosophies at the same time. We both kind of got into it at the same time, him maybe a little sooner than I. And he's the guy that I tell everybody taught me how to be a good tattooer, taught me how to treat this medium with the respect that it deserves, and to put the homework and the work into making myself a better practitioner. So we have like a piece he did in '96 versus a piece he did in 12 versus a piece he did in probably 12 as well. Very, very accomplished tattooer. We move on to Clifton Boggs, who is the owner of Eulogy Tattoo. Clifton works at Hot Rod quite a bit. He is the owner of the studio where Margot and Matt Rohr work. Very, very accomplished artist. We're very happy to have Clifton around whenever we can. The last section of this wall are representations of my probably biggest influential personal friend artists. So this is Andrew Connor, and this is Mike Dorsey. Andrew Connor and Mike Dorsey, I'm always trying to keep up with them as far as the quality of my work goes and the complexity of the stories that I'm trying to tell. They're both very, very smart fellas, very, very accomplished artists in several different mediums. It's not uncommon for Andrew to paint 4 or 5 paintings at a time, to be working on 1 or 2 oil paintings, 1 or 2 acrylic paintings, and 1 or 2 watercolor paintings, jumping from one to the other, waiting for drying time. It's very, very, very strict work schedule from that guy. And Mike Dorsey, and Andrew's from Alley Cat Tattoo in Harrisonburg, Virginia. He works with Chris Porter, who we showed you at the end of the wall. And he and I have known each other for a decade plus now. And he and Mike and I work conventions together often. And they're the guys that I feel most accountable to personally. Like when I have something that I really need critiqued and I don't need my ego stroked, I need somebody to tell me what's wrong with something, those are the guys that get the pictures emailed to them. Mike Dorsey tattoos out of a private studio in Cincinnati, Ohio. He worked in a public studio, like a street shop, for 20 years, and he has such a following now that he doesn't need to be, you need to know how to get a hold of Mike Dorsey and how to get tattooed from him, at this point. He's not super out there anymore. Mike Dorsey, perfect example of somebody that has learned the discipline of Japanese silk painting and applied it to his tattooing and applied his tattoo knowledge to his Japanese silk painting. All these are stories of Western and Eastern things. This is a very famous story about a famous outlaw and his lost love. This is her committing suicide at his grave. This double-headed bird here is a Japanese symbol of fidelity. So this is the second part of a diptych telling the story of her star-crossed love with this Japanese outlaw. This is a painting done of a Victorian-era psychic. She was a French woman. I can't remember her name at the top right now, but she was found out to be a hoax, and she was proven to be a charlatan when she was doing psychic readings and seances and things like that back in the 1800s or the 1900s. So this is her procuring ectoplasm from her hand, which is a common parlor trick done by those practitioners. And then there's an x-ray on her sleeve to show that it's just medical gauze that she's fishing out through her hand. This is a Japanese story about a very famous, it's not just one story, because you see this sort of image repeated a lot in Japanese woodblock prints, but the Japanese believe that if you cut the placenta out of a stillborn, out of a still pregnant woman and boiled it, that you could see the future in the fumes. So this is a woman being prepared to be slaughtered so that this witch, who you can barely see in the background, is going to be boiling her placenta over this fire to tell the future. This is a story about a Japanese Hanya demon, which is the female counterpart to the Japanese Oni demon. This is actually a woman. The Japanese, again, during that time where they were trying to keep men from brutalizing women, they created these supernatural monsters called Hanya demons, which were the personification of all the negative things that you could do to a woman, enraging her to the point of taking on a supernatural form. So basically, if you wrong a woman to the point where she becomes so enraged that she turns into this creature. So this is a piece of a famous story about a samurai warrior who was defending the east gate of a castle from a Hanya demon. They fought, he cut off the Hanya demon's arm, she flew away, and this is actually her returning to the castle gate to take back the severed arm and leave with it. This painting, which is done with Japanese silk paints, the same kind of paint that they would use 300 years ago, and done in a very French Art Nouveau style, depicting a Japanese folklore tale. So Mike is really good about mixing up all these different motifs and narratives that are usually told from one social perspective and telling you in another social perspective. I guarantee you this is the only time you see a depiction of this story handled in a French sort of manner. This is a sword of Fudo. The Japanese believe that, again, because there's no heaven or hell and there's just dichotomy, you know, everybody has a good sense and a bad sense at the same time, that God itself manifests itself in very fierce ways. So one of the manifestations of the fierce form of God is Fudo Mayu, who is the demon quencher. So like he basically kills demons. So Fudo Mayu kills Oni demons. His sword is supposed to be the embodiment of Buddhist strength. So his sword is kind of the weapon associated with Fudo, and when you see this sword, it's an homage to Fudo Mayu. So this sword embodies Buddhist power, and it's generally wrapped in flames, and sometimes the flames are turned into a dragon or turned into a phoenix, both creatures associated with Fudo Mayu. So throughout the whole exhibit, we have different examples of the type of vocabulary that a tattooer would use to express themselves visually, not only in the Western culture, because there's other sorts of obviously there's other sorts of influences on each artist that's been represented here, but the Japanese culture is the easiest to show that this is a culturally significant story that is told in a visual language that's specific to tattooing, and that the tattooing has had an effect on how some of these artisans have treated how they express themselves visually. So throughout this exhibit, you see different examples of the visual language of tattooing and the visual language of the artists that speak the language of tattooing as a secondary medium.